So let's look at some functions that are a little bit more challenging, that perform a little bit more uh, operations for us. So I'm assuming at this point you're familiar with functions and defining functions, at least some basic ones like add and multiply, and that you've already tried these problems on your own. And how I recommend you use this video is to try one problem at a time, and really ideally you should try all of them, and then watch the video solution for just one problem at a time. Then pause the video and take what you've learned on the prior problem and apply it to the next one. Your goal should be, before you complete this whole video, that you have successfully implemented at least one function on your own. That should be the goal. If you find that that's not the case, I highly recommend you reach out to me or the tutors, or work on some additional practice problems such as enrichment problems, which could be available from the tutors. Okay, so every time I start writing code, I always start with a leading comment. So writing functions 2, I include my author information. Okay, and so this is question number 4. Define a function, okay, so I know I'm going to use the def keyword, is even, that takes a number as a parameter, okay, and returns whether or not the number is even. So the way we determine if something is even is if it's a multiple of 2. The way we determine if something is a multiple of 2 is by using modulus, or the percent sign, the remainder sign. So if num mod 2 is something, then it's even. So an even number, when divided by 2, has no remainder. So if num mod 2 is 0, then is even is true, and that's what we return. You'll notice that in this particular function, we are using a Boolean condition. This is returning a Boolean value, true or false. So we don't have to be limited by the type of information. We don't just have to return numbers, we can return Booleans too. Typically, Boolean functions are indicated with something like an is as the first word of the name. Okay, awesome. So eventually I need to test these out. And to do that, this time I'm going to go ahead and define a main function. So def main takes no parameters, and my main function is going to call isEven. But I want to know what it's actually doing here. So I'm going to give myself a clue that this should be returning true. So I'm going to call isEven on the number 4. And then let's see what happens if we give it an odd number. Oops, I don't need the spaces here. So isEven, let's take 5. So 4 is even and 5 is odd. And just because it annoys me, make sure those capital letters. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run my program and verify that it is in fact working correctly. Uh-oh, what did I forget? Well, here again is an example. I defined my main function, but I neglected to call it. All right, let's try this again. There we go. 4 is even is true. 5 is odd. Oh, 5 is even. False. Perfect. That's just what we're looking for. Great. So let's go on to calculate total, the second question. Now, if you were having trouble with question 4, pause the video here and go and tackle this challenge on your own. You should have already implemented a lot of this functionality already. Now the new change is that we're adapting this to be a function instead. Okay, so I'm going to just keep adding to this program. I like to put my main on the bottom, and so I'm going to add my code above. So it says write a function, so I have to use define, write a function, calculate total, oops, underscore is there, calculate total that takes 3 parameters. And the parameter names are given to me. And if I give you that much detail in a question, I'm going to expect that your code is going to follow that specification. It's going to follow those guidelines. So meal, tax rate, and tip rate. So the variable names for the parameters are given to me. Now, what is it supposed to do? Proper tipping technique dictates that the tip should be calculated based on the total cost of the meal before tax is applied. Okay, so let's calculate the tip. Tip is going to be the meal times the tip rate. And then the tax is going to be the same thing. So the tax is going to be the meal times the tax rate. Okay. And then, so this function is going to take 3 parameters, and I think this specification is slightly ambiguous. It hasn't said that it's going to return the total, but that is in fact what it should be done. So 5 should return the total. Okay, so I'm going to return the total cost of the meal. I'm going to return meal plus tip plus tax. Okay, and now I need to actually print this out. Now in this example, it says the program should make 2 calls. I think I'm going to adjust that a little bit. I want to avoid user input here because I want my main to just run without me having to do anything. So print, whoopsies. So I want to print that the total should be 66.85. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I am testing my calculate total function with some known values. I happen to know that if I call calculate total with these 3 parameters, that the total should be 66.85. Okay, so let's give that a shot. Yep, and it is. I'm going to just add a colon to make sure it's clear. Awesome. So far our tests are working and our functions are implemented correctly. So let's keep going. We've got just a couple more. This says write a function hey. All right, I'm going to write another function. This is problem 6. Again, please pause the video if you haven't tried these yet. Write a function hey that outputs the following. Okay, so I'm going to take some kind of a number. All right, so hey of 5 gives me 25, hey of 0 gives me 0, and hey of -3 gives me 9. Well, gosh, that looks a lot like the relationship between the input parameter and what's returned, the output, is that the number is being squared. So I'm going to return number squared. Now I need to test it. So I am going to print out some results for myself. So I'm going to call hey of 5, and I want that to equal 25. So notice that when I'm testing my code, I'm not just running it, I'm also putting in the right answer, so I have to do less work, right? So I can just run my program and see that everything is as it should be. Make my life easy. So I'm going to do the same thing for hey 0. And that should be 0. And then I'm going to copy and paste this here. And then finally, -3. Hey of -3 should be 9. Okay, awesome. Let's give this a shot. Let's run it and see what happens. And so I expect that all of these 3 should come out true, and they do. Awesome. So one of the challenges with writing functions is figuring out which parts of the function are the same and where the variables come in. Which parts vary, which parts stay the same. And that's how we can write a generalizable function. Like in this case, hey is actually a squaring function. So we have to figure out what's the same about each of these relationships between the function call and what it's returning. Let's do the same thing for question 7. Okay, so I'm going to write a function there that takes, looks like one parameter. And now we got to figure out what this relationship is. We got 5 to 32, 0 to 1, 3 to 8, negative 2 to 0, negative 6 to 0. Well, 2 to the 5th is 32, 2 to the 0 is 1, and 2 to the 3rd is 8. So that's pretty good. However, negative 2, 2 to the negative 2 is not 0. So it looks like I'm going to need an if here, that the behavior is going to change. So if it's a negative number, I'm returning 0. Otherwise, I'm returning 2 to the parameter. Okay, so if num is less than 0, return 0. Otherwise, I'm going to return 2 to the num. Now notice, I didn't use an else. It's optional here because of the semantics of return. So when I return a value, I immediately exit the function. No more statements are executed once I hit a return. So the else bit here is absolutely optional. It's not incorrect to have it. It's not incorrect not to have it. Either way is correct. So here I'm saying if num is less than 0, return 0. If this were true, I would exit the function as soon as I hit this return. Otherwise, I'm returning 2 star star num. Because there's no other possibility, there's no possible way that something can meet the if condition and get to this point in the code, I don't need the else. It's optional. The last thing we have to do is to make sure that we test it and that it's working correctly. I am going to copy and paste what I had before, and we want in here we can use all of these as what's called our test cases, which are sample inputs and their corresponding outputs. Okay, so let's try there 5. There 5 should equal 32. Let's keep working. I'm going to copy this, and instead of doing 5, I'm going to get 0. This should be 1. And I've got 3. In fact, if you want, you could even simplify your life, and this print line you could actually replace with your own function call. I made what's called a test harness function, which allows me to test my functions more easily. You can see that in the solutions for these problems. Let me do -2. And I'm going to do -6 just for good measure. And these should also be 0. All right, let's see what happens when I run it. And again, notice that I'm testing each individual function before I go on to the next one. All right, I see that everything is true as I expect. So that's working absolutely correctly. Great. And now we are on to our last one. Okay, so last but not least, we have problem 8, where we're going to define a function are we, and it looks like it takes 2 parameters, a number and some kind of a string. And then it's going to print. So in this case, we're not returning, we're printing. We're going to print are we blank, so that this is our string, yet? Are we string yet? But it looks like I need to repeat it. Let's see. So we've got are we there yet? And we have a keyword there. And are we 50 yet? And then we've got nothing, like an empty string, and we have just simply are we yet? Okay. The other component to this is the number. So here we're writing are we there yet twice. Here we're writing are we 50 yet 3 times. Here we're writing it once, and here we're writing it none. So we're going to put this print, although it looks as if the end equals just a space. So now I need to repeat this. And I'm going to use a loop to do it. You could also use this to create a string and multiply that by number, but I'll show you what it looks like as a loop. So for I in range none, I have to indent this. And then I don't want to forget at the very end after the loop that I want to print a new line to get ready for the next time through. So let's take a look at this. And in this case, I'm just going to copy the call that I want. And I'm going to print that in. Okay. So I'm going to say print are we there? Now notice my quotes look like smart quotes. They're kind of tilted. That's a no-no in Python. It's not going to work when I'm inside of PyCharm. So if you ever copy and paste double quotes, make sure you go back through and double check that those are in fact straight up and down quotes. Okay, so are we there? And notice that I wanted to put the double quotes literally in my string, so I use single quotes to indicate my string rather than double quotes. Oh, and I don't want to forget my quotes. Okay, great. Let me try some of these others. It's too hard to check that my answers are correct, so I'm not going to do that. To check if my answers are correct using some kind of formatting here. So I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay, got one, an empty string, and finally 0, hey, 0, hey. All right, let's give it a shot and see if it's working. Awesome. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Yep, that matches. Uh-oh. I've got, looks like things aren't printing out the way I expected. Are we there yet? Are we there? None. Looks like something. Oh, right. Aha. This is what happens when you try to print a void function, as I have done here, and I'm not supposed to do that. Okay. So I have to put these all on separate lines. And get my syntax right by matching parentheses. Okay. And that's why I'm printing out none. So let's try changing this. Let's give this another shot. There we go. Okay, so are we there? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Great. Are we 350? Are we 50 yet? Are we 50 yet? Are we 50 yet? Awesome. Are we 1? Yep, are we yet? And then there's nothing output for are we 0 hey.